South America. Delight. Delight is a weak word to describe what a naturalist feels when he first walks through the forest of Brazil. The gracefulness of the plants, the complexity of the parasitic forms, the vivid green of the leaves of the jungle. One moment as silent as a cathedral, and the next deafening with the sound of insects. Or to lie by a fire after riding across the pampas of Argentina all day, and to watch the sparks of the fire rise into the sky and mix with the stars in a sky so black and full. All the while listening to an old gaucho singing some song of love and loss. It was a wonderful experience. If you ever have a chance for a voyage, even if you are seasick, I recommend you do it. It was there, of course, that some of my very orthodox religious feelings began to be challenged. For at the time, of course, orthodoxy preached that the earth was not very old. 6,000 years, perhaps. And it had been shaped by cataclysmic events, like the biblical flood. Fossils were explained as the remnants of those species killed during the flood. And the idea that each species had been specially created by God, and once created, it did not change. These ideas had been challenged before. In fact, my grandfather Erasmus had written in his Zoonomia that he believed that forms might change from one to another. But very few people believed that. But I began to see things there. Some of the fossils I collected in South America included the giant ground sloth, Mylodon, and a giant armadillo-like animal called Glyptodon. I sent those back to London, and I was not aware of it until I returned, but those were the fossils which made my reputation among the scientific men of England. They were so impressed. But they were impressed for the wrong reasons. What intrigued me was the fact that here in South America, the only place we found living sloths, we also found a fossil form. It was clearly a sloth. And here in South America, the only place we found armadillos. Again, a fossil form that was clearly related to armadillos. So we are left with a conundrum. A creator who destroys a sloth and an armadillo only to create another sloth and another armadillo in the same place. It seemed much more likely that in fact there was an ancestral sloth or an ancestral armadillo which gave rise to these various forms, some of which became extinct and some of which survived. It was also the time I began to question the length of time the earth had existed. Charles Lyell had written a book on geology, and Henslow had given me that book to read on the voyage. And in that book, Lyell had argued that it was not catastrophes that had shaped the earth, but the very forces that we see working around us now. Erosion, glaciation, volcanism, and that the earth was much more ancient, not thousands, but millions of years old. And this was confirmed when I climbed to the high points in South America, and I found marine strata, shows of marine life, thousands of feet above the sea, told me that almost the entire continent of South America had been uplifted from that sea, perhaps through volcanism, through millions of years. Pattern after pattern made me question these orthodox ideas. The island forms we encountered also had their own patterns. Of course, the Galapagos archipelago, we were late in discerning what the pattern was. You see, we had been there and we had been collecting, and it was late in our visit. We were about to depart when we discovered that each island had its own form of tortoise. And if you showed the carapace of a tortoise to one of the locals, they would be able to tell you which island that tortoise came from. Each of these small specks of lava had their own form of tortoise. And this made me go back and look at the mockingbirds that I had collected on those different islands. And lo and behold, I discovered that there was a different form on each of the islands. I then turned to the grosbeaks that I had collected, and unfortunately I had not written down what island they had come from. Indeed, they were not even grosbeaks. When I returned to England, John Gould corrected me and told me they were actually finches. But again, the question that came to mind, why create a special form on each of these islands, these small specks of volcanic rock in the middle of the ocean off the coast of South America? Yes, God sees every sparrow fall, but does he create these forms on such small, insignificant islands? Especially making them so similar to the forms on the mainland. How much more sense it made to me that some ancestral form had arrived from the mainland on the island and through time changed into these other forms that we could see were clearly related and yet uniquely different. These were the ideas that I returned to England with.